Hello everyone, today I'm continuing to review the 4 episodes from the Crash Course Psychology that explore some of the most challenging but fascinating areas of mental health, trauma and addiction, schizophrenia and dissociative disorders, eating and body dysmorphic disorders, and personality disorders. Together, these episodes give us a window into how psychological disorders are understood, diagnosed, and treated, as well as how they impact people's lives. Let's start with the trauma and addiction. So the trauma refers to the psychological distress that follows extremely stressful events, things like abuse or accidents or natural disasters. When this distress becomes long-lasting, it can develop into post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. Maybe you heard about it. PTSD is marked by symptoms like intrusive memories, nightmares, hypervigilance, and avoidance of reminders of the trauma. A crash course emphasizes that trauma fundamentally alters the way our brain responds to the world. Some areas of our brain, like they are processing fear, can become hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, which regulates responses, can become underactive. This imbalance explains why people with PTSD often feel stuck in a state of fear. This episode also connects trauma to addiction. Substances like alcohol or drugs can become coping mechanisms, numbing pain or anxiety temporarily. But this relief reinforces the behavior, leading to cycles of dependence. Sadly, addiction itself isn't simply about weak willpower. It's linked to changes in the brain's reward pathways, especially involving dopamine. Treatment for trauma and addiction often involves therapy, like cognitive behavioral theory, exposure theory, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. For addiction, medication, behavioral interventions, and the support group can play a role. The big takeaway is both trauma and addiction are medical and psychological issues, not personal failures, and they deserve empathy and treatment. The next episode 32 covers the schizophrenia and dissociative disorders. So the first terminology, schizophrenia, is one of the most well-known but often misunderstood mental disorders. Its core features include psychosis, which involves losing touch with reality. Positive symptoms are things that are added, like hallucinations, delusions, or disorganized thinking. Negative symptoms involve things that are lost, such as reduced emotional expression, lack of motivation, or withdrawal from social interaction. Cognitive symptoms like trouble with memory and focus also play a role. Schizophrenia has biological roots. Genetics, neurotransmitter imbalances, and brain structure differences all contribute. Treatments typically involve antipsychotic medications combined with supportive therapies. Despite the stereotypes, people with schizophrenia can and do live meaningful lives with the right support. And this episode turns into the dissociative disorders as well, which involves disruptions in memory, consciousness, or identity. Dissociative amnesia, for instance, involves memory gaps often linked to trauma. Dissociative fugue may involve sudden travel or wandering away from one's life with amnesia about one's past. Perhaps the most famous is dissociative identity disorder, or DID, which is a person may present multiple distinct identities or personalities. Although DID has been controversial, research suggests it often develops as a response to repeated trauma in childhood. Sadly again, serving as a coping mechanism, treatments focus on integrating identities and processing trauma. Together, schizophrenia and dissociative disorders highlight how complex the mind can be, sometimes splintering from reality, sometimes fracturing into separate parts. Alex, episode 33 talks about eating and body dysmorphic disorders, which show how deeply mental health is tied to body image. Eating disorders are not simply about food. They are about control, identity, and coping with psychological distress. There are different types of the eating disorders. For example, anorexia nervosa involves a severe restriction of food intake, intense fear of gaining weight, and distorted body image. And the bulimia nervosa involves a cycles of binge eating followed by purging behaviors like vomiting or overexercising. And the binge eating disorder involves repeated episodes of eating large amounts of food without purging, often linked to feelings of guilt or loss of control. All of this can cause serious medical consequences and require professional treatment. Closely related is body dysmorphic disorder, BDD. Unlike typical body dissatisfaction, BDD involves obsessive focus on perceived flaws in appearance that others may not notice at all. This preoccupation can lead to severe distress, social isolation, or repeated cosmetic procedures. In general, this episode highlights that both eating disorders and BDD are influenced by cultural pressures, like idealized body images in media, as well as biological and psychological factors. Treatments include therapy, especially CBT, nutritional consulting, and sometimes medication. And the next episode 34 examines personality disorders, which is super interesting and complicated. Unlike temporary mental states, personality disorders involve enduring, inflexible patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that cause distress or problems in relationships and work. Yeah, they are maybe pervasive. So basically, they are grouped in three clusters. The first cluster is odd and eccentric. This includes some typical disorders showing patterns of social withdrawal, distrust, or unsocial beliefs. Cluster B is more like dramatic, emotional, or erratic. This includes like some antisocial, borderline, hystrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. These are often marked by unstable emotions, impulsivity, or difficulties in relationships. For example, borderline personality disorder involves intense fear of abandonment and rapidly shifting moods. While antisocial personality disorder is associated with disregard for others' rights. Cluster C is about anxious or fearful. This includes avoidant, dependent, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorders. These involve chronic anxiety, need for approval, or perfectionism. Basically, personality disorders can be difficult to treat, partly because they reflect deeply ingrained patterns. But with therapy, especially some like the behavior therapy or other forms of the long-term psychotherapy, people can learn healthier ways to cope and build relationships. In conclusion, these 4 episodes of the Crash Course Psychology cover a wide spectrum of mental health challenges, from the trauma and addiction to psychosis and dissociation, to body image struggles and the deep-seated patterns of personality disorders. And there are lots of different personality disorders. And we are maybe at the beginning stage to explore them. What ties all of them together is the understanding that mental disorders are not character flaws. They are complex conditions shaped by biology, psychology, environment, experiences, and education, and so on. They remind us of the importance of compassion, early intervention, and evidence-based treatment. And perhaps most importantly, they show how resilient people can be, finding ways to heal and build meaningful lives despite the challenges. So, I'm very happy to learn the Crash Course Psychology, including all of the topics it talks about. I feel it can help us to better manage and live our lives. And thank you for listening, and see you next time. Bye.